Look who finally made it, our charity case. Marcus's voice cut through the humid airport air as I wheeled my suitcase toward the resort shuttle. The others laughed, their designer luggage gleaming beside my worn black carry-on. I smiled politely and climbed aboard, feeling their eyes burning into my back. They thought this trip was their gift to me, a generous gesture from successful colleagues to their struggling coworker. They had no idea it was actually my opportunity. My name is Lawson, and at 32 years old, I had spent 5 years working at Prestige Marketing Group alongside people who treated me like furniture. Marcus, Olivia, Troy, and Vanessa had formed their exclusive circle long before I arrived, and despite my contributions, I remained invisible to them. Until 3 weeks ago, when Marcus announced he was treating everyone to an all-expenses-paid vacation in the Bahamas. Everyone except me. Then Vanessa suggested bringing me along for laughs. The others agreed immediately. I accepted without hesitation, knowing exactly what they intended. This trip wasn't about relaxation or team bonding. It was about humiliation, about reminding me of my place beneath them. What they didn't know was that I notice everything. The resort emerged from tropical greenery like something from a movie. White columns, turquoise pools, and staff members offering champagne at the entrance. Marcus tipped extravagantly while Troy took photos for social media. Olivia adjusted her sunglasses and complained that her room wasn't oceanfront. Vanessa examined her manicure with exaggerated boredom, as if luxury bored her. I thanked the bellhop quietly and followed them inside, carrying my own bag while theirs were whisked away by resort employees. The lobby smelled like hibiscus and money. Chandeliers sparkled overhead. Everything gleamed with the kind of wealth I had never experienced growing up in a small Pennsylvania town where my mother cleaned houses and my father drove trucks. After college, I had worked 3 jobs to pay off student loans while my coworkers coasted on family money and connections. They bought designer clothes while I shopped clearance racks. They vacationed in Europe while I visited my parents for holidays. The distance between our lives felt enormous, and they reminded me constantly. But I had something they lacked: patience, attention to detail, and a memory that forgot nothing. This trip would prove useful in ways they couldn't imagine. The first dinner set the tone perfectly. We gathered on a terrace overlooking the ocean, surrounded by candlelight and the sound of waves. Marcus ordered the most expensive wine without consulting anyone, then made a toast to finally getting Hannah out of that depressing apartment and showing her how the other half lives. They clinked glasses while I sipped water, smiling as if grateful. Vanessa leaned closer, her perfume overwhelming. "You must be so excited. I bet you've never stayed anywhere this nice." Her tone dripped with false sweetness. I nodded agreeably, letting them believe I was starstruck and intimidated. In reality, I was listening carefully to everything they said. Troy began bragging about his recent promotion, conveniently forgetting to mention how he had stolen credit for my campaign proposal. Olivia interrupted with stories about her family's vacation home in Aspen, dropping names of celebrities she claimed to know. Marcus discussed his investment portfolio, his voice filled with smug satisfaction. I ate quietly, watching their faces, memorizing details. They drank heavily, their inhibitions loosening with each glass. And when Vanessa mentioned the arrangement in passing, I filed that phrase away carefully. The next morning they scheduled activities without asking my preference. Jet skiing at 10, spa appointments at 2, dinner reservations at 8. I was expected to follow along, grateful for whatever scraps of inclusion they offered. During breakfast, Olivia made a show of offering to pay for my spa treatment. "Consider it our gift. You work so hard for so little." The comment stung exactly as she intended, but I thanked her warmly. Troy snickered into his coffee. Marcus checked his phone constantly, his expression tight with concern. When he excused himself to make a call, I noticed Vanessa and Olivia exchange a meaningful glance. Something was happening beneath the surface of this perfect vacation. That afternoon at the spa, Vanessa's phone rang repeatedly. She answered once, whispering urgently before hanging up. Just work drama, she explained when Olivia raised an eyebrow. But her hand trembled slightly as she set the phone down, and I caught the name on the screen before it went dark. Preston Analytics. I knew that name. Preston Analytics was one of our biggest competitors, the firm we had lost 3 major clients to in the past 6 months. And Vanessa, our senior account manager, had just received a call from them during vacation. Interesting. By the 3rd day, patterns emerged. Marcus disappeared for phone calls twice daily, always returning irritated. Troy bragged constantly about his wealth but panicked when the bar tab arrived, quickly suggesting we split it. Olivia name dropped relentlessly but became defensive when anyone asked specific questions about her supposed connections. And Vanessa grew increasingly nervous, checking her phone obsessively. They continued treating me like a burden they charitably tolerated. During lunch, Marcus joked about my discount wardrobe. At the pool, Troy made loud comments about people who couldn't afford real vacations. Vanessa suggested I take photos of them, positioning me as their personal photographer rather than a guest. I complied with every request, smiling pleasantly while my anger cooled into something sharper. That evening, I deliberately stayed quiet during dinner, letting the wine and their egos do the talking. Troy mentioned a side deal he had arranged, something about redirecting client funds through a shell company. Marcus immediately changed the subject, but not before Vanessa's eyes widened with concern. Olivia laughed too loudly, trying to cover the awkward silence. I sipped my water and filed away another piece of information. The 4th night brought heavy drinking and looser tongues. We sat around the hotel bar, tropical drinks flowing freely. Marcus started complaining about our boss, Gerald, calling him too old and too trusting. The others agreed enthusiastically, their words slurring slightly. Then Troy said something that made my pulse quicken. Once Gerald retires, we'll finally restructure properly. No more dead weight. He glanced at me deliberately. The message was clear. I was the dead weight they planned to eliminate. Marcus raised his glass in agreement. Vanessa looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Olivia smiled into her drink. I excused myself to the restroom, my face calm despite the fury building inside. In the mirror, I studied my reflection. Plain features, simple clothes, forgettable presence. They saw someone weak and unimportant. They had no idea I had been documenting everything since day one. Every comment, every reveal, every slip. When I returned, the conversation had shifted to Olivia's family money. Except Troy asked a question that made her stiffen. How much did your dad actually leave you? Olivia's laugh sounded forced. Enough, she said vaguely. But her eyes betrayed something else. Panic. I started carrying a small notebook, disguised as a journal for vacation memories. In reality, I recorded everything. Times, dates, names, statements. I documented Troy's mention of shell companies, Vanessa's calls from Preston Analytics, Marcus's complaints about Gerald, and Olivia's evasiveness about her finances. Each entry was precise and detailed, the kind of documentation that couldn't be dismissed as misunderstanding. On day 5, I volunteered to organize group photos, which gave me access to their phones when they asked me to take pictures. Troy's email was open, revealing messages about offshore accounts. Olivia's banking app showed a balance far smaller than her lifestyle suggested. I memorized what I could and continued smiling. During an afternoon beach walk, Marcus and Troy hung back, speaking in low voices. I pretended to admire seashells while listening carefully. Marcus mentioned the merger deal, and keeping it quiet until paperwork clears. Troy responded with something about getting our cut before anyone notices. They were planning something involving company finances, something secret and likely illegal. When they noticed me nearby, they immediately changed topics, laughing about baseball scores. I waved cheerfully and continued walking, my mind racing. The pieces were connecting. Vanessa's anxiety increased daily. On day 6, She received another call from Preston Analytics and stepped away to answer it. This time I followed quietly, staying just close enough to hear fragments. "I can't yet," she whispered urgently. "After the Henderson contract transfers." "Yes, I promise. Next month." She was planning to leave Prestige Marketing and take clients with her. Specifically, the Henderson account, our largest and most valuable contract. That explained the mysterious calls and her nervousness. She was negotiating her departure while still on our payroll, preparing to betray the company that employed her. When she turned around, I was examining a flower display several feet away. She startled anyway, her face pale. "How long have you been standing there?" Her voice was sharp. I looked up innocently. "I just walked over. Everything okay?" She relaxed slightly, nodded, and hurried past me. That evening, I added detailed notes about her phone calls, including approximate times and the Henderson contract mention. The evidence was building beautifully. They thought I was oblivious, too intimidated and insignificant to notice their schemes. They were wrong. By the 7th day, my notebook contained a devastating record of their secrets. But I needed more than overheard conversations. I needed proof they couldn't deny. So when Olivia asked me to take group photos with her phone during dinner, I took my time, accidentally opening her messages while framing shots. What I found exceeded my expectations. Texts to someone named Christopher revealed that Olivia's family money had run out 2 years ago. She was drowning in credit card debt, maintaining appearances through loans and maximum credit limits. Her expensive lifestyle was completely fake, built on borrowed money and lies. More importantly, she had been billing personal expenses to company accounts, disguising designer purchases as client entertainment and charging her rent to marketing budgets. The messages showed detailed discussions of how to hide the fraud. I took mental snapshots of key messages, then returned her phone with an apologetic smile. "Sorry, I'm not great with fancy phones," I said sweetly. Olivia barely glanced at me, too busy posing for photos. None of them suspected anything. Why would they? I was just Hannah, the charity case, the background employee they pitted and mocked. The 8th day brought unexpected luck. Marcus left his laptop open in the hotel business center while taking a phone call. I had come to print boarding passes and found myself alone with his screen displaying his email. My hands shook slightly as I scrolled quickly through his inbox. There it was. Correspondence with a lawyer about the merger Troy had mentioned. Marcus was secretly negotiating to sell Prestige Marketing to a larger firm, planning to pocket a substantial finder's fee without informing Gerald or other partners. The emails outlined his strategy for manipulating company valuation and hiding assets before the sale. Even better, I found messages showing he had been embezzling client retainer fees, moving money into personal accounts before contracts were finalized. The amounts were substantial, and the pattern was clear. Marcus wasn't just unethical, he was actively stealing. I heard his voice approaching and quickly returned to my own laptop, pulling up my boarding pass printout. He entered, glanced at me dismissively, and closed his laptop without suspicion. My heart pounded, but my face remained calm. The evidence kept mounting, and they kept underestimating me. Perfect. During our last full day, they planned a yacht excursion, generously including me while making jokes about seasickness and sunburns. On the boat, champagne flowed freely and their arrogance reached new heights. Troy bragged about a deal he had sabotaged to benefit himself. Olivia complained about poor people ruining exclusive beaches. Marcus discussed investment strategies that sounded suspiciously like insider trading. Vanessa grew quieter as the day progressed, clearly stressed about her secret negotiations. When her phone rang again, she moved to the front of the yacht to answer. I followed casually, pretending to enjoy the view. This time I heard her entire conversation. "Yes, I'll bring the Henderson files next week. No, nobody suspects anything. The transition will be seamless." She paused, listening. "The contract renews in 2 weeks. I'll have everything transferred before they notice." Another pause. "Hannah. She's nobody. She won't be a problem. I stood frozen at the railing, staring at the ocean. She had just confirmed everything: the client theft, the timeline, and her complete dismissal of me as a threat. When she ended the call and turned around, I was gazing peacefully at dolphins in the distance. She never suspected I had heard every word. That final evening, they threw a celebration dinner that was really just another opportunity to mock me. Marcus made a speech thanking everyone for tolerating our little charity project this week. Troy added that I should be grateful for the experience of seeing how successful people live. Olivia patted my hand condescendingly. Vanessa remained distracted, barely participating. I thanked them sincerely, my voice warm with apparent gratitude. This trip taught me so much. I'll never forget it. They smiled, pleased with themselves, completely missing the double meaning. This trip had indeed taught me everything I needed to know about their crimes, their weaknesses, and exactly how to destroy them. As dessert arrived, Troy's phone rang. His face went pale as he answered, stepping away from the table. When he returned minutes later, he looked shaken. "Everything okay?" Marcus asked. Troy nodded unconvincingly, forcing a smile. But I had noticed the caller ID before he answered. Federal Trade Commission. The shell company he had mentioned, the redirected client funds, someone was investigating. And based on Troy's expression, he knew his schemes were unraveling. I savored my chocolate cake, watching him squirm. His downfall was already beginning, and mine would accelerate it. The flight home felt longer than the flight there. They dozed in first class while I sat in economy, exactly as they had arranged. But I didn't mind the cramped seat or lack of legroom. I spent those hours organizing my notes, creating a timeline of revelations, and planning my next steps. I had documented Marcus's embezzlement and secret merger negotiations, Vanessa's client theft and betrayal, Troy's shell companies and fraudulent accounting, and Olivia's expense fraud and financial deception. Each person had committed career-ending offenses, and I possessed detailed evidence of everything. But I couldn't reveal it all at once. That would be impulsive and potentially ineffective. Instead, I needed strategy, timing, and precision. I needed to ensure maximum impact with minimum risk to myself. As the plane descended toward home, I finalized my plan. First, I would document everything properly with dates, times, and supporting evidence. Second, I would identify the appropriate authorities for each offense. Third, I would create a sequence of revelations that would destroy them systematically while protecting my position. And fourth, I would wait for exactly the right moment. Patience had brought me this far. Patience would finish what they started. Monday morning arrived with normal routines. I returned to my small desk in the corner office while Marcus, Vanessa, Troy, and Olivia reclaimed their spacious workstations. They largely ignored me, already dismissing the vacation as completed charity work. Occasionally one of them would mention an inside joke from the trip, laughing while I smiled politely. Gerald, our 60-year-old founder, called a company meeting to welcome everyone back. He praised the team's hard work and announced upcoming contract renewals, specifically mentioning the Henderson account as crucial to our year-end success. Vanessa shifted uncomfortably in her seat, took careful notes. After the meeting, I approached Gerald privately. "Do you have a minute?" His kind face brightened. "Of course, Hannah. How was the Bahamas?" Smiled. "Educational. Actually, I wanted to discuss something important about company security and client retention. Could we schedule a confidential meeting?" Gerald's expression turned serious. "Is everything all right?" I nodded carefully. "I believe so, but I've noticed some concerning patterns I think you should know about. Nothing urgent, but worth discussing privately." He agreed immediately, scheduling time for Thursday afternoon. 3 days to finalize my evidence and prepare my presentation. Those 3 days moved slowly. I arrived early and left late, compiling my documentation into organized folders. I created spreadsheets showing Troy's suspicious transactions, timelines of Vanessa's phone calls aligned with Henderson contract dates, and copies of the emails I had memorized from Marcus's laptop. For Olivia, I outlined the pattern of fraudulent expense reports with specific dates and amounts. Wednesday afternoon, Troy's investigation intensified. 2 men in suits arrived, identifying themselves as federal auditors. They spent hours in the conference room with Troy, reviewing financial records. His confident demeanor crumbled visibly. By day's end, he looked exhausted and frightened. Marcus noticed and pulled Troy aside, their conversation hushed but urgent. I continued working at my desk, apparently focused on client reports, actually listening carefully. "What did you tell them?" Marcus hissed. "Nothing yet," Troy whispered back. "But they know about the Riverside account. Someone talked." Marcus's face darkened. "Find out who." They both glanced around the office suspiciously, but neither looked at me. Why would they? I was just Hannah, invisible and insignificant. Their fatal mistake. Thursday arrived with perfect timing. That morning, Vanessa received another call from Preston Analytics, speaking urgently in the stairwell. I happened to pass by, overhearing her confirm meeting times and file transfer logistics. "Next Tuesday," she promised. "Everything will be ready." The Henderson contract renewed in 10 days. She planned to move before that, taking our most valuable client with her. But she wouldn't get the chance, because my meeting with Gerald was scheduled for 2 o'clock. I spent lunch reviewing my presentation one final time, ensuring every detail was accurate and verifiable. This wasn't about revenge in the petty sense. This was about justice, about protecting Gerald's company from people who were actively destroying it while mocking those who actually cared. At 1:50, I gathered my folders and walked to Gerald's office. His secretary waved me in. Gerald sat behind his desk, his expression concerned but open. "Hannah, please sit down. You mentioned concerning patterns." I placed my folders on his desk carefully. "Yes, and I believe you need to see this immediately." Then I began explaining everything, starting with the vacation and ending with federal auditors questioning Troy yesterday afternoon. Gerald's face progressed through disbelief, shock, anger, and finally grim determination as I presented each folder. I showed him the timeline of Vanessa's calls with Preston Analytics, explaining her plan to steal the Henderson account. His hands tightened on the desk. Next came Marcus's embezzlement evidence and secret merger negotiations. Gerald's face went pale. "He's been stealing retainer fees." I nodded, showing the pattern I had documented. "And negotiating to sell your company without your knowledge or consent." Troy's folder revealed the shell companies and redirected funds, explaining yesterday's federal visit. "The investigation is already underway," I said quietly. "But I thought you should know the full scope." Finally, Olivia's expense fraud. Receipts for designer clothing marked as client entertainment, rent payments disguised as marketing expenses, personal trips billed to company accounts. The evidence was overwhelming. Gerald sat in silence for several minutes, processing everything. Finally, he looked at me with something like wonder. "How did you gather all of this?" I explained the vacation, their carelessness, my attention to detail. He shook his head slowly. "And they never suspected you were paying attention. They think I'm nobody," I said simply. "That was their mistake." Gerald asked me to stay while he made phone calls. First to his lawyer, then to his accountant, finally to the board members. Each conversation was brief and serious. By 4 o'clock, emergency meetings were scheduled for the following morning. "Hannah," Gerald said after the final call, "I need you to understand something. What you've done here, bringing this to me, you've likely saved this company from complete destruction." His voice was thick with emotion. "Marcus alone could have bankrupted us, combined with Vanessa's client theft and Troy's fraud." He trailed off, shaking his head. I nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. "I just noticed things that didn't seem right." Gerald smiled sadly. You noticed what I should have seen myself. I trusted them completely. He paused. I'm implementing some immediate changes. First, your position. Effective immediately, you're promoted to senior analyst with a substantial salary increase. Second, I want you involved in the internal investigation we're about to launch. My breath caught. The promotion I had worked toward for 5 years, always passed over for Marcus's circle, was suddenly mine. But not through their generosity, through my own careful observation and courage to speak up. Friday morning brought chaos. Gerald called individual meetings with Marcus, Vanessa, Troy, and Olivia. I wasn't present, but the results were clear. By noon, all 4 had been suspended pending investigation. Security escorted them from the building, their faces stunned and furious. Marcus demanded explanations. Gerald provided them coolly, reading from my documented evidence. Marcus's eyes found mine across the office, and for the first time, he truly saw me. Not as furniture or charity, but as the person who had destroyed him. His expression twisted with rage before security led him away. Vanessa left quietly, her face blank with shock. Troy argued loudly about lawsuits until the lawyer Gerald had retained shut him down with legal facts. Olivia cried, begging for another chance, but her fraudulent expenses were too extensive to forgive. One by one, they disappeared from the building, their careers ended by their own greed and arrogance. The office felt different afterward, lighter somehow despite the chaos. Employees whispered about what had happened, but Gerald kept details confidential, protecting both the company and the ongoing investigations. I returned to my desk, now located in a better area of the office, and continued working as if nothing had changed. The legal proceedings took months. Federal prosecutors charged Troy with wire fraud and money laundering related to his shell companies. He eventually pleaded guilty, receiving probation and substantial fines. His career in marketing was finished. Marcus faced embezzlement charges and civil lawsuits from both Gerald and the merger company he had deceived. The evidence I provided was irrefutable. He lost everything. His position, his reputation, and most of his assets paying legal fees and restitution. Vanessa's attempt to steal the Henderson account failed spectacularly. Gerald contacted Henderson directly, explaining the situation and providing evidence of her betrayal. Henderson not only renewed with Prestige Marketing but expanded their contract, impressed by Gerald's integrity. Vanessa found herself unemployable in the industry, her betrayal well known. Olivia's expense fraud resulted in criminal charges and a demand for repayment. Unable to pay, she declared bankruptcy. Her fake lifestyle collapsed completely, revealing the desperate financial reality she had hidden for years. I testified when required, always calmly and precisely. Lawyers tried to discredit me, but my documentation was too thorough. Judges and prosecutors praised my attention to detail. 6 months after the vacation, I stood in Gerald's office receiving another promotion. Senior Marketing Director, the position Marcus had held. My salary had tripled since that trip to the Bahamas. More importantly, I had Gerald's complete trust and respect. You saved this company, he said seriously. And you did it with integrity. You didn't go to competitors or the media. You brought it to me first, protecting our reputation while exposing the truth. He paused. I should have valued you properly from the beginning. Smiled. You gave me a chance when you hired me. That was enough. Gerald shook his head. No, it wasn't. But I'm grateful you stayed anyway. He handed me a folder. I've been working on a new initiative, a mentorship program for employees, with a focus on merit over connections. I want you to lead it. The irony wasn't lost on me. The person they had brought on vacation as a charity case, the employee they had mocked and dismissed, was now in charge of ensuring others didn't face the same treatment. I accepted gratefully. That evening, I treated myself to dinner at a nice restaurant, nothing extravagant, just a quiet celebration. My phone buzzed with a message from Olivia. "I'm sorry," it read simply. I didn't respond. Apologies didn't erase actions. A year after the vacation, prestige marketing was thriving. Gerald had implemented the changes I suggested, creating a culture based on competence and ethics rather than connections and appearances. Employee satisfaction increased. Client retention improved. Revenue reached record levels. My team grew to 12 people, all chosen for skill and integrity. We landed major accounts, including several that had previously worked with Marcus. When clients asked what had changed at Prestige, I explained our new focus on genuine relationships and honest work. They appreciated the difference. I moved into a better apartment, paid off my student loans completely, and started saving for my own house. Nothing extravagant. I didn't need luxury to feel successful. Comfort and security were enough. Occasionally I saw updates about my former coworkers online. Troy worked part-time at his brother's business. Marcus had moved across the country, starting over in a field unrelated to marketing. Vanessa posted motivational quotes about resilience, her professional network destroyed. Olivia had disappeared from social media entirely. I felt no satisfaction in their suffering, just quiet acknowledgement that consequences had arrived exactly as they should. They had built their own downfall through greed and arrogance. I had simply documented it. 18 months later, I received an invitation to speak at a marketing conference about ethical leadership and organizational integrity. The presentation focused on recognizing warning signs of fraud and maintaining professional standards. I didn't mention names, but I shared lessons learned from observing corruption firsthand. During the Q&A session, someone asked how I had found the courage to report such powerful colleagues. I thought carefully before answering. "They weren't powerful," I said finally. "They just acted like they were." Real power comes from integrity and competence, not from intimidation or pretense. Once I understood that difference, speaking up became easier. The audience applauded. Afterward, several young professionals approached me with their own stories of workplace mistreatment and questions about handling difficult situations. I listened carefully, offering advice when appropriate, mostly encouraging them to document everything and trust their own observations. That evening, I returned to my hotel room and looked at the conference badge with my name and title. Hannah Lawson, Senior Marketing Director. 5 years ago I had been nobody. Not because I lacked ability but because people with power refused to see it. Now they had no choice but to notice. 2 years after the vacation, Gerald announced his retirement. At the company-wide meeting, he named me among his potential successors, praising my leadership, ethics, and strategic vision. The promotion wasn't guaranteed. I would compete with external candidates, but being considered felt like vindication. During the transition period, I worked closely with Gerald, learning his approach to running the company. He shared insights about leadership, about balancing profit with principles, about recognizing talent regardless of background. "I failed to see what was happening under my own roof," he admitted one afternoon. "I won't make that mistake again." I appreciated his honesty. "You created a company worth saving," I reminded him. "That counts for something." He smiled gratefully. "And you actually saved it. That counts for more." 3 months later, I was named CEO of Prestige Marketing Group. At 34 years old, I led the company that had once treated me as invisible. The press release emphasized my rise through merit and my commitment to ethical leadership. Clients responded positively. Employees seemed genuinely pleased. Even industry competitors sent congratulatory messages. The girl who had once cleaned houses alongside her mother was now running a multimillion-dollar marketing firm. The journey felt surreal but earned. Today, 5 years after that vacation, I keep a small reminder in my office. Not the notebook that's locked away safely, but a photo from the trip. In it, Marcus, Vanessa, Troy, and Olivia smile at the camera, champagne glasses raised, expressions smug with self-satisfaction. I'm barely visible in the background, holding the camera that took the shot. I look at it sometimes when making difficult decisions, remembering what unchecked arrogance and entitlement produce. It reminds me to stay grounded, to value substance over appearance, and to never underestimate people based on surface judgments. Prestige marketing continues growing. We've expanded to 3 cities, doubled our client base, and maintained a reputation for integrity that sets us apart. I personally mentor employees who remind me of myself. Hardworking, observant, underestimated. Several have already risen to leadership positions. As for that vacation, it really was worth every moment. Not because I enjoyed the beach or luxury, but because it revealed exactly who my colleagues were beneath their polished exteriors. They paid for the trip with money. They paid for their secrets with arrogance. And I paid with patience and attention. The best revenge wasn't destroying them. It was succeeding so completely that their downfall became merely the foundation of my rise. They wanted to humiliate me. Instead, they gave me everything I needed to surpass them entirely. And that absolutely was worth it.